I wasn't supposed to hear that voicemail, but the moment I did, my whole world tilted. It happened on a Wednesday. Funny how the quietest days carry the loudest betrayals. I remember the house smelled like lemon cleaner. I just mopped the hallway. Windows cracked open to let in that soft early evening breeze, the kind that makes the curtains sway like they're whispering secrets. My husband, Daniel, had left his phone on the console table by the stairs, the screen lighting up every so often with work messages. Nothing unusual. Then it rang. A missed call, followed immediately by a voicemail. I didn't plan to touch it. God knows I had no business doing so. But the phone buzzed again, one of those glitchy stutters it sometimes gets, and somehow, with my fingertip brushing the screen to silence it, the voicemail began to play on speaker. For a moment, I froze. Then I heard her voice. His mother, sharp as broken glass, soft as poison. Daniel, she said, her tone low and urgent. I need the money by Friday. Don't make me tell her what I know. I'm not playing games. My knees buckled so hard I had to brace myself against the wall. The mop handle clattered onto the floor. Tell who? What secret? What money? I stood there, breath held, as the voicemail ended with a cold click as if she were hanging up on me personally. The silence afterward felt heavier than any words could have been. And right then, in the middle of my clean hallway with lemon on my hands and my heart pounding through my ribs, I realized my mother-in-law was blackmailing someone, and the secret she threatened to reveal involved me. The room seemed to shrink around me. My first thought wasn't anger. It was confusion, the kind that comes in soft waves, whispering, "This can't be what it sounds like." She wouldn't do that. Not to me, right? But deep down somewhere beneath my ribs where old instincts lived, I knew better. Because if there's one thing I'd learned in the years since marrying Daniel, it's this. His mother does not make idle threats. I replayed the message 3 times before I even realized I had tears on my face. Not loud crying, just a slow, trembling drip I didn't notice until a tear dropped onto my forearm. I wiped it away with the back of my wrist and stood straighter, breathing in slow. I didn't know everything then, but I knew enough. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a joke. Someone in my life, someone I trusted, held a knife to my back, and for reasons I didn't yet understand. That knife had my mother-in-law's fingerprints all over it. People always say trouble gives you X-ray vision for the past, that once something cracks, you start seeing all the smaller fractures that were there long before. But if you'd asked me a month before the voicemail whether my marriage was stable, whether Daniel and I lived a peaceful life, I would have said yes. We lived in a modest 2-story house outside Greenville, the kind with a wide porch and 3 steps that creak no matter how gentle you try to be. I teach 3rd grade at a public school 5 minutes from home. My mornings are a routine. Oatmeal with cinnamon, the local station humming low on the radio, Daniel kissing my forehead on his way out because he always leaves 15 minutes before I do. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. On weekends, we'd make pancakes. He always burned his first one, and sometimes we'd drive to his mother's place for dinner. Those dinners were polite, civil, but never warm. His mother, Irene, had a way of looking at me like she was trying to find something wrong, something broken, something she could fix or blame. She never succeeded, at least not out loud. Still, she loved her son. That part I never doubted. And Daniel, in his quiet way, loved her deeply. He felt responsible for her since she'd been alone after his father passed. So I always tried to be patient, graceful, understanding. It's strange how easily we learn to shrink ourselves to keep a family peace that doesn't include us. Before the voicemail, life was steady. We had savings goals. We talked about trying for a baby in a year or 2. Daniel had been working long hours, and I chalked it up to a new project at his engineering firm. Now, looking back, those long hours feel different, heavier, like they were hiding a weight he never let me see. But I didn't know any of that then. Back then, everything still felt normal enough. I remember one morning in particular, maybe a week before the voicemail. Daniel stood at the stove flipping eggs, humming an old Motown song he probably got from his father. The kitchen smelled like butter and toast, and sunlight stretched across the counter like a warm yellow cloth. I leaned my hip against the doorway and just watched him. He looked tired, I remember thinking. Not unhappy, not stressed exactly, just worn around the edges. "Did you sleep okay?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he slid an egg onto a plate and forced a small smile. "Yeah," he said. "Just a lot on my mind." "Work?" "Yeah, work." He said it quickly, too quickly, but I didn't push. I had never been a prying wife, and he had never been the kind of man who hid big things. Or so I believed. I carried that simple scene with me later, after the voicemail, like a puzzle piece that started fitting somewhere it never belonged. But in that moment, before everything collapsed, he was just another quiet morning, another day in the life I thought was safe. That's the part no one tells you. Betrayal doesn't usually slam into your front door. Most times, It tiptoes in while you're making breakfast. About 2 weeks before the voicemail, I started sensing something off with Irene, my mother-in-law. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just a shift. During one of our Sunday dinners, she kept giving Daniel these little looks, tight, calculating glances that passed too quickly for anyone else to notice. But I saw them. Wives notice the direction their husband's eyes travel. They also notice the direction other people's eyes travel toward their husband. Irene barely touched her food that night. Every time I tried to draw her into conversation, she redirected her gaze to her son instead of answering me. Then, at one point while I was clearing plates, I heard her whisper sharply, "You need to handle this, Daniel. I'm not asking again." By the time I turned around, she'd already smoothed her face back into neutrality, the way someone fixes a curtain to hide a broken window. When I asked Daniel about it on the drive home, he brushed it off. "She's just being dramatic," he said, sighing. "You know how she is." But his thumb tapped the steering wheel in this restless rhythm he only did when he was lying. I didn't accuse him of anything. I didn't even raise my voice. I just tucked the moment away like a folded note in a drawer, telling myself it was nothing. But the truth is, suspicion grows the same way mold does silently, in corners you don't check often enough. And the night I heard that voicemail, those quiet shadows came rushing back all at once. After hearing the voicemail, I moved through the house like I was stepping on thin ice, careful, disoriented, listening for cracks beneath every breath. I didn't confront Daniel right away. That's something I think people misunderstand about moments like this. You imagine yourself storming into a room, demanding answers, slamming your palm on a table. But betrayal doesn't ignite you. It chills you. It makes you quiet, observant, almost painfully so. And in that silence, I began noticing things, small things I had shrugged off before. Like how Daniel guarded his phone more closely now. He used to leave it charging on the kitchen counter overnight. Suddenly, it lived on his side of the bed, turned face down. Or how his shoulders tensed when certain calls came through. Calls he declined quickly with a thumb that trembled just a little. Or the new habit he developed of stepping outside to check on something in the car, though he rarely returned with anything in hand. I watched him the way someone watches their own breath in winter air, quiet, sharp, aware of every wisp. The hardest part was pretending nothing had changed. Pretending I hadn't heard the words, "I need the money by Friday. Don't make me tell her. I'm not playing games." Irene's voice echoed inside my skull like a stone rolling back and forth in a metal bowl. But the real fear wasn't her voice. It was the question her voice carried. What secret could she possibly have about me? I replayed my entire life with her in my memory, scanning like a security tape. Had I said something wrong? Had I shared something too personal once? During one of those fragile attempts at bonding during my first years of marriage? Had I unknowingly offended her? Hurt her? But nothing made sense. Unless the secret wasn't about me. Unless it was about Daniel, something she planned to pin on me to force him to pay. My stomach twisted at the thought. I wouldn't put it past her. Not after years of little battles, quiet ones, polite ones, but battles nonetheless. Like the time she pulled Daniel aside after our wedding and whispered, thinking I couldn't hear, "She's a nice girl, but is she strong enough for this family?" Or the day she accidentally sent me a photo of the woman Daniel had dated before me with the message, "He always looked happiest here." Or the Christmas she gifted us an envelope containing a check, addressed only to Daniel with a note. "Just in case you need something of your own." Those weren't accidents. They were warnings. Lines drawn in invisible ink. So, yes, the possibility that she might be manipulating something bigger didn't feel far-fetched anymore. Still, I waited. I moved around Daniel gently those days, watchful but tender, my voice soft, my eyes wide open. Because if I learned anything from watching my own mother handle delicate things, it was this. When something is cracking, you don't press on it. You observe where the fracture begins. And the fracture, in my case, began that Friday. That Friday, Daniel came home late, much later than usual. He smelled faintly of sweat and cold air, the kind of scent you get when you've been pacing outdoors. His hair was mussed, his jaw tight. He gave me a quick kiss, quick enough to be polite, distant enough to sting, and walked straight to the bedroom. I followed quietly, leaning against the doorframe as he opened his dresser drawer. A white envelope sat inside. He paused when he saw it, as if it were an animal capable of biting him. Then he tucked it deeper under his folded t-shirts. I exhaled softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Long day?" He stiffened, hand still inside the drawer. "Yeah," he said without turning around. "Exhausting. Anything you want to talk about?" "No. Too sharp. Todo defensive." His tone cut the air like a knife slicing cloth. I stepped into the room slowly. "Daniel, did something happen today?" He closed the drawer with a thud, not loud, but firm, and finally looked at me. His eyes softened for a split second, like he hated himself for being distant. Then he forced a smile. "Nothing happened, sweetheart. I'm just tired." And he leaned down to kiss my forehead, just like he always did. but his lips were cold. I wanted to tell him about the voicemail. About everything. I wanted to ask him whose money he was paying, why he was hiding it, why his mother was threatening him, why my name was in her mouth at all. But I didn't. Because the truth was still a creature in the shadows. And I fear that if I confronted it too soon, he'd hide it deeper. So I simply nodded and let him pass, even though the air felt too heavy to swallow. The next morning, after Daniel left for work, I finally allowed myself to look. I didn't touch anything, just opened the dresser drawer and stared. The envelope was plain, unmarked, slightly wrinkled at the edges. Thick, stuffed with something. Cash. It had to be. My throat tightened. There is a specific feeling you get when you realize your life is splitting open like a seam tearing down the center of your heart. It isn't loud. It isn't chaotic. It's quiet, steady, inevitable. I stood there staring at the envelope like it was a ticking clock. Whatever was happening was bigger than a misunderstanding, bigger than Irene's cold words, bigger than any fight Daniel and I had ever had. Something was being hidden, something that involved money, secrecy, and me. And I could no longer pretend not to notice. I closed the drawer carefully, the way you might close the lid on a fragile box, and walked out of the bedroom. My hands were shaking. That night, I lay beside Daniel in the dark, feeling the length of the mattress between us like a mile-wide canyon. He slept fitfully, tossing, sighing through clenched teeth. At one point, he whispered something so faint I barely caught it. "Please, don't tell her." I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. The secret was eating him alive. And before long, it would eat our marriage too. So I made a choice. I would find out the truth myself, even if it broke me. The following Monday, I woke with a steadiness in my chest I hadn't felt in days. Fear had been swallowing me whole. But fear has a strange way of transforming into clarity when you've had enough. If Daniel wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. Because secrets create storms. And I had lived through enough storms to know when to take shelter. Even if the shelter meant stepping into the rain long enough to understand which direction the clouds were coming from. During my lunch break at school, I sat alone in my car with a thermos of coffee cooling in the cup holder. I cracked open the glove compartment where Daniel kept the statements for our joint bank account. I had never gone through them before. Trust had been my default setting. But trust without clarity is just hope wearing a blindfold. I flipped through envelopes, each one stamped with the same return address. Most were ordinary transactions, groceries, gas, utilities. But one statement caught my eye. A withdrawal of $3,500 from our savings. 3 days before the voicemail. My heart thudded against my ribs. We didn't make large withdrawals without discussing them. We prided ourselves on budgeting, on planning, on being a team. But $3,500 wasn't a slip. It was a decision. A secret one. I sat there, staring at the number until it blurred. My hands trembled so much I had to place the statement on my lap just to keep from dropping it. If Irene needed money by Friday, what had Daniel already paid? And what was he still paying for? The more I thought about the voicemail, the more I replayed her tone, not frantic, not desperate, confident. Like she held all the cards. Like she'd done this before. I pressed my palm against my forehead, breathing slow. I wanted to tell myself I was reading too much into it. But the truth had a way of sharpening inside my chest, becoming undeniable. My mother-in-law was extorting someone in this house. And that someone was my husband. The question was why. I decided to visit her. Not to confront. Not yet. Just to observe. One thing about Irene. She liked control. She kept her home immaculate white lace curtains, porcelain figurines lined up on the mantel, pillows arranged so perfectly you'd think measuring tape was involved. Whenever you stepped into her living room, you felt like you were intruding on a museum set to chilly elegance. I knocked softly on her door that Tuesday after school. She opened it wearing a pearl necklace and a pressed blouse, as if she knew I was coming. "Emily," she said, her lips forming a smile that never reached her eyes. What a surprise. I stepped inside, noting the faint aroma of lavender polish in the air. She always cleaned before receiving visitors, usually as a way of asserting superiority. "I was in the area," I said calmly. "Thought I'd stop by, Ali." But lies flow easily when you're searching for the truth. She guided me to the sofa, folding her hands neatly in her lap. The room was warm but felt cold, another one of her contradictions. "How is Daniel?" she asked, tilting her head. I studied her face. Smooth. Controlled. Not a flicker of guilt or fear. "He's been tired lately," I said. "Stressed. Work, I assume?" Her voice dripped with feigned innocence. "Perhaps," I replied, watching her eyes narrow just a hair barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Something in her expression shifted then. A quick flicker like a curtain moving in a draft. "Money troubles?" she asked casually. Too casually. My breath stilled. She wanted information. She wanted to see what I knew. I forced a soft laugh. No, we're fine. Her gaze lingered on me, assessing, calculating. Then she reached out and patted my hand, something she rarely did. Well, that's good, she said, smiling in a way that felt like a warning. We sat there for several minutes, exchanging polite words, all while my heart raced beneath my ribs. Every glance she made toward her kitchen door, every small twitch in her jaw, every too-measured tone, it all unsettled me. I left after 20 minutes, knowing no more facts than when I arrived, but knowing in my bones that she was hiding something major. That night, Daniel came home later than usual again. He tossed his keys onto the counter, rubbed his eyes with both hands, and sank into the armchair like a man carrying a boulder on his back. I watched him, every movement, every sigh. Finally, I spoke. Daniel, I said softly, I stopped by your mother's today. His eyes shot open. The panic was instant. Unmasked. You... What? Why? I swallowed, keeping my voice steady. I wanted to check on her. He stood abruptly, pacing. His hands shook slightly. She's fine. You shouldn't... Why didn't you tell me you were going? The defensiveness sliced deep. Why does it matter? I asked gently. He stopped pacing. Didn't answer. Didn't even look at me. So I walked to him, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. Daniel, I whispered. Is something going on between you and your mother? He shook his head violently. No, nothing. Everything's fine. But his voice cracked on the word fine. It broke me, more than any shouted argument ever could. I reached for his arm. He flinched not away from my touch, but away from what the question meant. Sweetheart, I said, you're not okay. He froze. And then, for the first time in weeks, he let out a sound that wasn't a sigh or a lie. A sob, not loud, not dramatique. Just one sharp, broken inhale that shattered inside his chest. He sank onto the couch, covering his face with both hands. His shoulders shook. I knelt beside him, rubbing slow circles on his back, my own breath trembling. Tell me, I whispered. Whatever it is, tell me. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he lowered his hands and looked at me with eyes full of dread. Emily, he whispered, voice hoarse. I should have told you sooner, but if she finds out I said anything, she'll ruin everything. My heart still, everything. That word echoed. Ruin what? I asked. He inhaled shakily, and then he said the sentence that started unraveling every thread of my marriage. My mother has something on me, something she's been using to control me for months. My breath caught. And now, he whispered, tears slipping down his face, she's threatening to use it against you. For a moment, the room felt hollow, like the air had been pulled from it. I could hear nothing but the faint ticking of the wall clock and Daniel's unsteady breathing. What is she threatening to use against me? I asked softly. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, shame creasing his forehead. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of his own truth was shrinking him. Daniel hesitated. Then he stood and walked across the room, stopping by the window, staring out into the dark yard as if he could disappear into it. She said she'd tell you something, he finally whispered. Something that she knows will hurt you. Hurt us. My stomach tightened. Daniel, you're speaking in circles. What is it? What does she know? He swallowed. Hard. She knows about the money. He blinked. The money you gave her? He shook his head. No, not that money. A chill crawled across my skin. What money, Daniel? He turned, then slowly, his face pale as porcelain. In January, he said, voice barely audible, I took out a personal loan. Behind your back. My breath stuttered. A loan. In secret. For what? I asked, trying to steady myself. To help her, he said. She told me she was in trouble. She said she'd lose her house if I didn't step in. And she swore she'd tell you something. Something she said would make you leave me. I shook my head. That doesn't make sense. What would she tell me? He closed his eyes. And right there, the truth broke loose from him. She told me she would tell you I cheated. My heart nearly stopped. What? I whispered. I didn't, he said quickly. Emily, I swear on everything on us I never cheated. I never touched anyone. But she said she would make you believe it. She said she would show you proof. My whole body trembled. But you didn't cheat, I said again. My voice barely sound. He shook his head, tears sliding down his cheeks. No, never. Then how would she? She said she had emails, he said, his voice cracking. From a fake account she created. Messages she wrote pretending to be me. She said she had photos she staged. She even... He cut himself off, covering his mouth with his trembling hand. She planned everything. Months of it. The room spun. I gripped the arm of the couch just to keep myself upright. Irene, his mother, creating fake evidence, staging an affair, threatening to destroy our marriage. For money. I felt sick. Sicker than I'd ever felt in my life. But why? I whispered. Why would she do this to you? To us? Daniel sank back onto the couch, looking utterly defeated. Because, he whispered, she hates how much I love you. My heart clenched. She said I've changed since marrying you. He continued. She doesn't like that I don't drop everything for her anymore. She says you took me away. That I owe her my life after everything she sacrificed raising me alone. I sat down beside him slowly, as if my bones no longer remembered how to bend. So she blackmailed you, I said quietly, into paying her, using a lie she created. He nodded. And you paid her because you thought I might believe her? His chinkiverda. I didn't know what else to do. She threatened to send everything to you. To your friends. Your job. My job. I panicked, Em. I didn't want to lose you. I closed my eyes. My mother-in-law, blackmailing her own son, fabricating an affair, threatening to shatter our marriage. For control. For the power. For money? But there was something else in Daniel's eyes, something darker, a guilt that wasn't explained yet. So I steadied my voice and asked the question that was curling inside my ribs. How long has she been doing this? I hesitated, and that hesitation was the answer. Daniel, I whispered. How long? He exhaled broken. Since September. September? I felt the sting like a slap. That's 8 months ago. He nodded miserably. 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of secrecy. 8 months of my husband being manipulated behind closed doors. Why didn't you tell me? I asked again, softer. Why didn't you trust me? His face folded with grief. I was ashamed, he said. Ashamed I let her get to me. Ashamed I didn't stop it early. And the deeper it got, the harder it became to tell you. My throat grew tight. Then last week, he added, I told her I couldn't keep paying. I told her I needed to stop. And she said if I didn't give her another $5,000 by Friday, she'd send everything to you. Everything. Including the fabricated affair. I squeezed the cushion beside me until my nails dug into the fabric. And the voicemail? I whispered. She meant it. He nodded. And the envelope in the drawer? That's the money you saved up? He nodded again. Ashamed. I stared at him, this man I loved. This man I'd built a life with, and all I could think was, this woman, this mother, this person who should have been our family, had been trying to destroy us from the inside out. And Daniel, kind, gentle, conflict-averse Daniel had become her hostage. I stood slowly, needing air. He reached for my hand, panic rising. Emily, please, don't walk away. I'm not leaving you, I whispered. I just need to breathe. He let go reluctantly. I walked to the kitchen, bracing myself against the counter, feeling the tile cool beneath my palms. My breath came out shaky, irregular. How do you process a truth so twisted? How do you swallow the knowledge that a woman you called family had orchestrated a campaign to break you apart? I heard Daniel step behind me. What are we going to do? He whispered. I closed my eyes. What were we going to do? Expose her? Pay her? Cut her off? Confront her? Every option was a wound waiting to open. Daniel, I said, slowly, turning toward him. We're going to handle this. Together. But we cannot let her hold you hostage anymore. We cannot let her control our life. He nodded, tears sliding silently. And we're not giving her another dime. He swallowed, fear flickering across his face. She'll retaliate. Then, we will face whatever she throws, I said firmly. But no more secrets. No more lies. No more being afraid of your own mother. For the first time in months, something shifted in his expression, not relief, but resolve. He reached for my hand, gripping it tightly. She won't stop, he whispered. I know, I said. But neither will we. The next day was Wednesday. The day everything would come to a head. I woke with a steady ache in my chest, but also a strange fire, something alive, something clear. I wasn't going to hide anymore, and neither would Daniel. We spent the morning planning, talking through every possibility. What she might say, what lies she might spin, what she might twist. And by evening, we had a plan. We were going to her house. Together. Not to plead, not to negotiate, to face the truth head on. As we drove toward Irene's pristine white house, Daniel's hand trembled slightly in mine. You ready? I asked gently. He exhaled slowly. As I'll ever be. And as we pulled into our driveway, I felt it. The chapter of pretending was over. The confrontation, the raw, truth-filled, unavoidable heart of everything, was waiting on the other side of that door. I don't know how long I sat there on the kitchen floor after Daniel left that afternoon. My back was against the cabinet, my knees pulled halfway to my chest, and the house felt far too quiet, as if something had been unplugged from the center of it. From the center of me. I kept replaying the confrontation, each line sharper and more jagged than the one before. It's none of your business. That one hurt the most. Not the money, not the lying, not even the fear in his eyes, but the words, the implication. As though I were... what? Some stranger? Some bystander in the life we had built together? The distance between us had grown into something physical, not just emotional. A wall, thick as concrete. And on the other side of it, Daniel was hiding something that involved me, my name, my life, my marriage, and he'd rather bleed alone than tell me. I wiped my face slowly, my palm cold against the damp skin. Grief moves strangely. It doesn't arrive in a single wave. It comes in pulses like aftershocks, and those aftershocks kept coming all afternoon. I stood eventually, though I moved like a woman climbing out of deep water, slow and disoriented, everything heavier than it should have been. The rest of the day passed in a fog. I washed dishes that didn't need washing. I refolded bath towels. I organized a drawer of batteries, cables, and pens that had never asked to be touched. When you can't fix the thing that's broken, you fix anything else your hands can reach. But underneath it all, under every movement, throbbed a single truth. I couldn't keep pretending everything would magically resolve if I just waited quietly. The waiting was killing me. The silence was killing me. And Daniel, my Daniel, was slipping further and further away. I couldn't lose him. Not like this. Not to secrets. Not to his mother. Not to fear. And certainly not to a lie I wasn't even allowed to understand. So that evening, when the sky turned a dusky blue and the house settled into its nighttime hush, I made a decision. A quiet one. A private one. But at a decisive one. I would meet Irene myself. I didn't call ahead. Didn't warn her. Didn't plan what to say. Planning felt useless now. Truth like this didn't obey scripts. I parked in front of her house, a house Daniel had helped paint when he was 19. A house where she had once handed me a glass of lemonade on a scorching summer day and told me, with a too tight smile, "Our family is complicated. I hope you're strong enough for it." I stepped out of the car. My legs felt steady. Steadier than they had all day. I knocked. It took her only a moment to open the door, almost as if she'd been waiting. When she saw me, her eyebrows lifted, not surprised, but something else. Something unreadable. "Ah," she said softly. "So he didn't tell you." My heart thudded once. Hard, like a fist against a door. I swallowed. "He didn't tell me anything." She sighed, long and dramatic, stepping aside. "Come in." There was something off in her voice. Not triumphant. Not mocking. Tired. Resigned. As though she'd been carrying something heavy too, and was finally ready, maybe even relieved to set it down. I entered the living room. The house smelled like old carpet and lavender cleaner. The curtains were half closed, letting only slivers of orange evening light spill through. Irene sat slowly, as though her joints ached. She motioned for me to sit opposite her. Silence stretched tense but strangely calm. Then she looked at me. Really looked at me. Her eyes softer than I'd seen in years. "You know," she began. "I never wanted it to get this far." I held my breath. Her fingers twisted together. "Daniel thinks he's protecting you," she said quietly. "And maybe in his mind he is. But secrets." Her mouth tightened. "Secrets rot people from the inside." I felt a chill run across my shoulders. "What secret?" My voice cracked despite my best effort. "Please, I need to know." She closed her eyes. For a moment, she looked older. Fragile, even human. When she opened them again, they were wet with something that looked dangerously close to regret. "It's about the accident," she whispered. My stomach dropped. "What accident?" 13 years ago, she said, barely audible. "The one that happened before you met him." I stared, confused. Daniel had never mentioned any accident. Irene continued, voice warping slightly as though she were fighting old, buried emotion. "There was a girl, younger than him, 17. She crossed the road at the wrong time." She swallowed hard. "He tried to stop the car, he did. But it was raining, and she didn't make it." I froze. My fingertips went numb. "Daniel? An accident? A girl who died? But he would have told me," I whispered, though it came out more like a plea than a statement. "He would have told me." "He tried," she said gently, "many times. But every time he got close, he panicked. He thought you'd see him differently. Thought you'd fear him. Thought he didn't deserve you." I gripped the edge of the sofa cushion, my nails digging in. "And the money?" My breath shook. "Why the money, Irene?" Her expression tightened with something like shame. Her family fell on hard times, she said. They never blamed Daniel, but he blamed himself. And quietly, he's been helping them. For years. The room tilted. Recently, she continued, they needed more than he could manage alone. So he came to me. He didn't want you to know he was struggling. Didn't want you to worry. Didn't want you to think he'd failed. I felt tears slide down my face, but not from betrayal. From heartbreak. From relief. From grief for the boy he once was. Standing in the rain over a mistake that changed a life. Then Irene whispered the words that undid me completely. He wasn't afraid of losing the money. He was afraid of losing you. My chest tightened around a sob so fierce I had to cover my mouth. All this time, the distance, the lies, the secrecy, they weren't rooted in mistrust. They were rooted in fear. Shame. Guilt he had carried like a stone in his ribcage. And the threat she made in the voicemail? She wanted him to tell you, Irene said quietly. She thought hiding something like this from your spouse was corrosive. She was harsh, but her intention wasn't to hurt you. She just wanted him to stop destroying himself in silence. The world blurred. My pulse echoed in my ears, loud and heavy. I felt something inside me shift, a painful, aching shift. The truth wasn't clean. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And it was finally, painfully, wholly mine. Driving home from Irene's house felt like moving through a dream I couldn't fully wake from. The world outside my windshield blurred from the streetlights streaking into gold lines, to the dark silhouettes of trees swaying like shadowed witnesses. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but inside, everything shook. I kept hearing her voice. He wasn't afraid of losing the money. He was afraid of losing you. The sentence looped in my mind like a haunting refrain. A truth wrapped in tragedy. A confession Daniel had never spoken, yet had bled for in 1,000 quiet ways. When I pulled into our driveway, the house looked strangely unfamiliar, like something temporary. Something built on soil that had just shifted under it. The porch light glowed warmly, a contrast to the storm inside me. I stood for a long moment at the front door, before stepping inside. The house was dim. Quiet the way a house feels when someone is awake inside, waiting. I found him sitting at the kitchen table. The same table where we'd eaten countless breakfasts, argued about bills, laughed over spilled coffee, whispered secrets in the small hours of the night. But tonight, he looked smaller, folded into himself, like a man waiting for a verdict. When he lifted his head and saw me, something inside him cracked. His shoulders slumped, his eyes filled with a raw mixture of guilt, fear, and an exhausted kind of surrender. You talked to her. Not a question. A realization. I nodded. He closed his eyes, inhaling sharply as if bracing for impact. For a moment, I didn't speak. I just looked at him, not with anger, with devastation, with love twisted into a knot of hurt. My voice, when it finally came, was soft but steady. Daniel, why didn't you tell me? He opened his eyes slowly. Pain swam in them deep, heavy, years old. Because, he whispered, I thought if you knew, you'd never look at me the same way again. But you didn't do anything wrong, I said, though the words trembled. It was an accident. He let out a choked laugh, one with no humor at all. You think I don't replay it every night? His voice cracked. You think I don't see her running out into the road? You think I don't hear the rain? The brakes? He stopped, breath hitching painfully. It doesn't matter what the police said. It doesn't matter what her family said. I knew the moment it happened that a part of me would be carrying her forever. My throat tightened until it hurt to swallow. It continued, eyes burning. And then I met you. He looked at me as though he were seeing the last thing keeping him standing. You were this quiet, steady light. And for the first time, I thought maybe I wasn't meant to drown. My heart cracked. But I was terrified, he went on, voice fading into helplessness. Terrified that if I told you, I'd lose the only good thing I've ever had. I sank into the chair across from him, my palms pressed together in my lap. Daniel, I whispered, you didn't trust me with the truth. He flinched. A full-body reaction. I know, he said, and I'm sorry. God, I'm so damn sorry. But every time I tried to tell you, I'd look at you and think, what if she sees me differently? What if she's afraid? What if she leaves? My eyes filled again. Keeping a secret like this, I said softly, is another kind of leaving. He looked up quickly, eyes wide with panic. No, please don't say that. He reached out instinctively, then pulled his hand back as if afraid he no longer had the right to touch me. I took a breath, slow, shaky, stabilizing. I'm not angry about the accident, I said. I'm angry that you carried this alone for so long, that you shut me out, that you suffered silently while I stood right beside you, thinking we were a team. He swallowed hard, tears gathering in his eyes. I was trying to protect you. You are hurting us. I whispered. Silence pooled between us thick, heavy, honest. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. Irene shouldn't have threatened you, he said quietly. I never wanted her to involve you. I told her that. She wasn't threatening me, I said gently. She was trying to get you to tell the truth. He let out a long, shaky exhale. I know. I stared at him, at the man I loved. The man I thought I knew entirely. And I realized something that settled painfully, but clearly in my chest. Love doesn't only fail when someone betrays you. It also begins to fail when someone hides too deeply inside themselves. He whispered, "Please say something." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said the truth I had finally found inside myself. I wish you had trusted me with your broken pieces, I said. I would have held them. I would have held you. He squeezed his eyes shut as tears slid down. You still can, he whispered. My breath caught. The plea in his voice, the vulnerability, the years of guilt crumbling at the edges. It was almost enough to shatter me. Almost. I reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers tightened instantly, desperately around mine. But things have to change, I said softly. You can't shut me out anymore. Not like this. Not about something so heavy. We face things together, or not at all. He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. I can do that, he said. I will do that. For the first time in weeks, there was no distance between us. No hidden envelopes. No late-night whispers. No ease. Just two people sitting across a table, hurt, raw, but finally honest. I squeezed his hand gently. We'll get through this, I said. But it's going to take work. And you have to let me in. Fully. No more walls. He looked at me like I'd handed him something holy. I'm done with walls, he whispered. I promise. And for the first time since everything began, I believed him. People like to imagine that once the truth comes out, everything gets easier. It doesn't. Truth isn't a key that unlocks a door. It's a mirror. And when you look into it, really look, you have to face the parts of yourself you'd rather keep blurred. The next morning was strangely quiet. No tension, no secrets, but also no instant comfort. Just two people moving around each other with a careful kind of gentleness, like touching a bruise that hasn't quite healed. I made coffee while Daniel sat at the table scrolling through his phone without really looking at the screen. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, landing on his face, highlighting how tired he truly was. I set his mug in front of him. Thank you, he murmured, his voice hoarse. We didn't speak for a few minutes, and I realized something important. Healing doesn't begin with big conversations. It begins with quiet moments where two people choose to stay. When he finally looked up, his eyes held something steadier. Can we talk more about last night? He asked. I nodded and sat across from him, our familiar positions, but with something new between us now. Honesty. He took a breath. I want to tell you everything. Not just the accident. So I did. Piece by piece. He told me about the weeks after it happened, about how he couldn't sleep, how he avoided driving through certain areas of town, how he couldn't pass a laundromat without remembering the red hoodie the girl had been wearing when he saw her step into the road. He told me about the guilt that had clung to him for years, how he feared happiness because he felt he didn't deserve it, how meeting me was the first time he'd felt light again, and how that light scared him, because loving someone after you've survived something dark can feel like daring the universe to notice you again. When he finished talking, he wiped his face with both hands, exhausted but weightless, like he'd set down a bag he'd been carrying for too long. I reached across the table and took his hand again. I'm here, I said softly, and we'll work through this. Together. He nodded, squeezing my fingers with trembling gratitude. But there was still one more person we needed to deal with. Irene. We didn't go to confront her. Not this time. We went to talk. She opened the door slowly, her eyes flickering with uncertainty when she saw us standing side by side. If she expected anger or accusation, she didn't find it. Her voice was quiet. Come in. We sat in her living room, the same space where she had once tried to pull me aside and suggest I wasn't equipped for their family. But this time, her posture was different. Smaller, softer. Daniel spoke first. Mom. I told her everything. Irene closed her eyes as if she'd been waiting for those words for years. When she opened them again, they were glossy. I'm glad, she said. Her voice shook, but there was no edge in it. I expected her to justify the blackmail, to argue, to protect her pride. Instead, her shoulders collapsed. I'm sorry, she breathed. I thought I was helping. I thought if I pushed you to face it, you could finally stop carrying all that guilt. Daniel shook his head gently. You didn't have to threaten us. You could have talked to me. I did, she whispered. For years. But you always shut down. And then, you married her, this woman who loved you so openly, who never saw the darkness in you, and I thought, if she finds out, maybe you'll finally let yourself be free of it. Her eyes met mine, and I saw her truth. Her desperation wasn't about control. It was about fear. Fear of losing her son to a secret he couldn't outrun. Fear that silence would swallow him whole. Fear that I, his wife, was living in a house built on a lie that would collapse eventually. She was wrong in her methods. Deeply wrong. But her intention wasn't cruelty. It was panic wearing the mask of manipulation. Daniel's voice soft. Mom, I know you meant well, but you hurt us. She covered her face with both hands, shoulders shaking. I know, and I'm so sorry. The house fell quiet, except for her muffled crying. I didn't speak right away. I let her grieve the years she'd spent in fear. The years Daniel had spent in guilt. The months I'd spent confused and suspicious. When she finally looked up, I spoke gently. I don't hate you, I said. I was hurt. Deeply. But I don't hate you. Her eyes widened, watery and surprised. I just wish, I continued, that you had trusted me. Trusted our marriage. Trusted your son. Irene nodded slowly, small, fragile movements. You're right. And I will do better. I promise both of you. Daniel reached for her hand. She held him like she was afraid he might vanish. It wasn't a triumphant moment. It wasn't vindication. It was quiet, humble reconciliation. And it felt right. Healing didn't happen in a day, but something shifted that afternoon. Daniel slept through the night for the first time in months. He started therapy not because I asked, but because he chose to. We talked every night after dinner, really talked not just about the accident, but about our fears, our dreams, our childhoods, the disappointments we never voiced aloud. Irene kept her distance at first, giving us space. But over time, she reached out gently, small steps. An invitation for dinner, a handwritten apology note, a quiet embrace on our doorstep. Our family didn't just survive the truth. We grew through it. We rebuilt trust. We relearned each other. We softened in the places where we used to harden. But it wasn't easy. And it wasn't quick. Healing rarely is. But it was real. And it was earned. Healing has a certain sound to it. Not the dramatic rush people expect, no sudden breakthroughs or choir of angels. It's quieter, like the soft clicking of a lock finally opening after years of rust. Like chairs scraping gently as two people sit down to talk instead of walk away. Like the steady, rhythmic breath of someone who has finally learned how to sleep again. Months passed. Real months. Not the kind that blend together when you're carrying secrets or waiting for the other shoe to drop. These months had weight and presence. They held new routines, new boundaries, and a slow but steady rebuilding of trust. Daniel went to therapy every Thursday after work. At first, he resisted, nervous, ashamed, unsure of how to start. But after the third session, he came home with his shoulders noticeably lower, his eyes softer. One evening, as we lay in bed, he whispered, I talked about the accident today, for the first time in years, out loud. I brushed my fingers through his hair. And how did it feel? He exhaled a deep, long exhale that sounded like he had put something heavy down. Lighter, he said, like I finally opened a window. I kissed his forehead, not out of celebration, but out of deep, steady support. Healing wasn't an event, it was a practice. And we practiced it every day. For a long time, I avoided Irene, not out of spite, but out of self-protection. There are injuries that don't bleed, but still need bandages. She seemed to understand that. Her invitations were gentle, infrequent, and never pressured. Eventually, though, we shared moments again. Small ones at first. Like the Sunday she dropped off a casserole with a note that simply read, no expectations, just lunch, and love. Or the time she called me, not Daniel, to ask how he was doing. Her voice was softer now, less sharp, almost grateful. Then one afternoon in spring, she invited us over for tea. I expected awkwardness. Maybe some forced conversation. Maybe too many apologies, or too few. What I found instead was a woman who looked humbled, not defeated, just human. She poured tea into delicate cups, the porcelain clinking lightly against the saucers. I noticed her hands shook a little, not from age, from emotion. She spoke gently. I want to say this without you interrupting, she said, looking at both of us. I was wrong, not only in what I did, but in how I've treated you, both of you, these past years. She looked directly at me. I never gave you a chance, she whispered, and you deserved one. The admission was so simple and yet so monumental that it knocked the wind out of me. I reached for her hand. I forgive you, I said, but I also want us to move forward differently, with honesty and respect. Her lips trembled into a small smile. That's all I want. Daniel squeezed my knee gently, a quiet thank you for being kinder than his fear believed I could be. It was one of those rare moments in life when you can actually feel the ground settle beneath you. One of the final steps came unexpectedly. On a rainy Tuesday evening, While I was folding laundry in our bedroom, Daniel came in holding a shoebox I'd never seen before. His eyes were steady. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded and sat on the bed. He placed the box between us and removed the lid. Inside were pieces of the past, crumpled letters, faded photographs, a newspaper clipping about the accident, and the original police report. My heart began beating slowly, deliberately, as if bracing itself. He lifted the items one by one, speaking quietly. "These are the things I kept," he said. "The things I thought I had to hide." "Why?" I asked softly. "Because I thought if I ignored them, if I pushed them deep enough, maybe the guilt would go away." He looked at me, but it never did. "And now?" I asked. "Now," he said, voice steady. "I want you to see them. I want you to know all of me, even the parts I've buried. And after that, I want to let them go." I felt tears rise. Not from pain, but from something deeper, relief. Relief that he had finally chosen openness over fear. We went through each item together. He cried sometimes. I cried with him. At the end, he placed everything back in the box and closed the lid. "Tomorrow," he said, "I want to burn it. Not to erase the past, but to stop letting it own me." I cupped his face gently. "I'll be there," I whispered. And I was. The next evening, under the pale glow of our backyard lantern, he lit the edges of the papers. The flames curled upward, orange and hungry, devouring the years of shame he had carried. We stood side by side, hands intertwined, watching embers float upward like tiny, glowing pieces of the life he was finally releasing. When the fire died, he looked at me with quiet certainty. "I'm ready to live," he said. "Really live." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "And I'm ready to live with you." People think healing is about forgetting the pain. It's not. Healing is remembering without flinching, trusting without trembling, loving without holding something behind your back. It's accepting that the person beside you is imperfect, beautifully, painfully imperfect, and choosing them anyway. It's letting the truth breathe instead of burying it. It's learning that forgiveness is not a single act, but a daily decision. And slowly, gradually, our home filled with something new. Not innocence, not perfection, safety. And safety, I learned, is a deeper love than perfection could ever offer. You know, when I look back on everything that happened, every secret, every tear, every night I lay awake wondering what was breaking inside my home, I realized something I didn't understand at the time. Sometimes the people we love the most aren't hiding things to deceive us. They're hiding because they're afraid of losing the one place they finally feel safe. And sometimes, the people who hurt us aren't acting out of malice, but out of fear that if they don't control the story will swallow the ones they love. But here's the truth I carry now. Secrets don't protect love. They poison it. And the only way to clean poison from a wound is to open it, wash it out, and let it heal in the light. That's what Daniel and I learned. That's what Irene learned. And that's what I hope someone out there, someone listening tonight might need to hear too. Your pain doesn't make you broken. Your past doesn't make you unlovable. And your truth, no matter how heavy, does not make you unworthy of being held with gentleness. I used to think strength meant holding everything inside, keeping the peace, keeping my voice soft and my fears quieter. But now I know strength can be quiet, but it is never silent. Strength is asking the hard questions. Strength is choosing honesty over comfort. Strength is letting people see the parts of you that aren't polished or perfect. And love, real love, meets you there. So let me ask you something. The way Auntie May always does. If you heard a truth tonight that reminded you of your own life, would you have done what I did? Would you have stayed, fought, listened, or walked away? Tell me in the comments, baby. You know I'm always listening. And if this story touched your heart even a little, go on and subscribe, follow, support the channel. It helps keep these stories going, one truth at a time. Until next time, take care of your heart. It's the only home you carry wherever you go.